I didn't really have any qualifications from a producing or stage management or operational working in an event world qualification. I did a music degree. Like, I started performing as a kid. That's how I kind of got into this world. No, less than 5 minutes until we're meant to be in position on the pitch with the banner, and we're in the wrong corner of the stadium. And I just, it's like terror, right? When you're like, you're in a nightmare. And I was like, I've never missed a show in my life. Like, Kat, I'm early for everything.
Oh, I know. Like, I'm stressed for you right now. I feel this for you.
Yeah, you build in buffer everywhere, buffer time everywhere. And I was literally like, we're not going to make it. For me, having the ability to kind of feel like you have a connection and an understanding of creative and stage management and operations and technical and all the different departments is actually probably the most important thing to be able to deliver a role as a producer. But because I would like to think that I understand the creative process and I understand what it means to be a creative and be attached to ideas. When I go into the studio and I have ideas that my producer we're working through. So like I know what it's like to be a creative person.
Welcome to the Theatre Art Life podcast. Today we are speaking with Liam Rorke.
Liam is an experienced and driven event producer with a huge passion for ceremonies and large-scale events. Originally from a theatre background, Liam transitioned into the ceremonies world with the 2018 Commonwealth Games opening and closing ceremonies on the Gold Coast and has never looked back. Across the last 4 years, Liam has had the opportunity to work across the world on globally renowned events and ceremonies, including Expo 2020 Dubai, 2022 Birmingham Commonwealth Games, 2022 FIFA World Cup, and the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. Liam, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So nice to have another Aussie on the podcast. So
yeah, nice to hear a familiar accent, although yours is obviously not quite that strong anymore. And I feel like neither is mine. Most people don't pick, a lot of people I work with, they think I'm British or they don't pick the Australian because to international people, Australian is like Steve Irwin,
Yeah.
So when you don't have that super strong outback accent, people tend to not pick it.
I think you find that you have to be a lot more you have to neutralize your accent quite a lot once you start working internationally so that people understand you. Do you find
Definitely.
that?
Yeah, I remember my first international job, which was in the Middle East. It was in Bahrain, and my boss at the time just kept being like, "You have to slow down when you talk." And I do have a predilection to talking fast and thinking fast and just being, speedy generally. But also being in the Middle East, right, and having an Australian accent, people who don't have English as their first language, and I was mostly responsible for like back of house cast movement. So you're trying to organize, high volumes of people, and and I remember I came out of like one of the first meetings being like, yeah, I did such a good job. I really concentrated and focused on talking really slowly, and she was still like, Liam, you were still talking way too fast. I was like, no. But,
it's so funny because I've had a lot of the same feedback. It must be an Australian thing.
Definitely.
It definitely is. And it's so funny because I spend a lot of time working with people from Australia. And so for me, I don't think about it at all. But just yesterday, I was speaking to two of my colleagues, one of them French Canadian and one of them Australian. The Australian person left the room and the French Canadian man said to me, do you have any idea what he just said? and I was like, well, yes, of course.
Oh, I love it. Cross-cultural interactions is always fun. So, Liam, tell us for those people who don't know what a producer does for ceremonies and large-scale events, tell us what your role is and how that works.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as a producer, generally, it's like, to really simplify it, it's just to ensure that everything really happens in time in the way it's meant to. And I think there's two kind of really key parts to that. And one of those is the people kind of side of things. You're always working with other people in high stakes environments, and you're working to budgets, to timelines, to deadlines, to pressures from the client or from whatever side. And it's about being able to manage people's expectations and also manage their ability to deliver. And that's sometimes, and everyone obviously works in different ways. So sometimes that's being, firm with someone, or sometimes that's being really supportive of someone. And I think it's a really big part of it is knowing how different people operate, knowing how and when to have certain conversations, how and when you can kind of let something go and go, you know what, that's not critical right now. This is the fire we need to put out today. So it's definitely people management, and also then being able to prioritize and compartmentalize and go, okay, these are the things that really need to be fixed, and these are the things that aren't. It's generally kind of being the person that kind of oversees all the different departments that are required to produce or to make a ceremony happen, or a major event, and keep things kind of really linked together, and keep everyone on the same page and moving in the same direction and reading off the same playbook. And there's a lot involved to that. And I think it's, like I said, a lot of it is people, kind of understanding people and understanding the nature of a show and what really needs attention at a particular point in time, and kind of like guiding. It's like a how do I explain, like a gas valve, kind of like you're releasing things at certain times in certain ways, and just like letting things go here and then holding that up here. And it's kind of like juggling and managing all the pieces of the puzzle. And so in a simplified but sometimes not so simplified way, I think that's probably how I would explain what it is that a producer does in this kind of world.
Yeah, that's a good summary. And Liam, you come from a theater background, as do many of our listeners. Could you explain what the similarities and differences are between a similar position in theater and what you're doing now in large-scale events?
Yeah, I think it's nearly the same thing, really, if you're comparing producing in theater and producing in ceremonies. The fundamentals are the same. A lot of the departments are even the same. A lot of your deliverables are the same. It's just obviously ceremonies, generally when you're working in a stadium space or a much bigger venue, has kind of unique challenges that you don't necessarily face in a theater. Normally when you go into a theater, a lot of the times, obviously every venue is different, but you have that team from that space who is providing a certain amount of things to you, which is often higher than what you're getting as a level of service in certain ceremonies, like in terms of just basic power and things like that. So there's some changes in terms of the scale and in terms of some of the intricacy, but at the end of the day, you're still putting on a show. You still have a cast, you still have technical requirements, you still have budget, you still have timelines, you still have to manage creative, desires and making them come to fruition. You still have publications, you still have programs, you still have media, and it's very much the same. I think it's just, I guess, the scale is obviously larger if you're in a larger space and you're in an 80,000 seat stadium, let's say. But that's obviously not to diminish what theater is, and obviously theater is extraordinarily complicated in many, many ways, and has certain challenges that you don't have to face in a ceremony. So I think they are quite similar, and that's why, as you say, a lot of people kind of transition between or start in one and move to the other, or kind of move back and forth. A lot of it is very transferable.
In your sort of trajectory in your career thus far, Liam, was it you started in theatre and you went to into the ceremony world? Did you have any formal training prior to that? And also the second question on that is, when you made that transition from theatre into ceremonies, what was the upskilling you felt you had to learn when you did make that step?
Yeah, good questions. I think just on the qualification part, I didn't really have any qualifications from a producing or stage management or operational working in an event world qualification. I did a music degree. Like, I started performing as a kid. That's how I kind of got into this world. So I got into the arts myself, and I did stuff as a kid, and then I studied all the disciplines, and then I focused more on music as I kind of got older. So I did a music degree after I finished school. And that's it in terms of training. I didn't do any kind of courses or learning about how to, event manage or produce or stage manage or any of those things. So I really had to learn on the job. I definitely had to pretend I knew what a lot of things meant when I absolutely did not know at all what they meant. And I think upskilling, I was really lucky. Like, I was really lucky to get the role that I got on the Commonwealth Games. So I think at that point I only had a relatively small amount of experience working in theatre. So there was a lot for me to learn. I think again, it was going from at that point I'd done smaller kind of theater shows. I hadn't done like what you would consider like mainstream big commercial theater, right? So to go from more kind of still professional theater, but smaller theaters and more kind of, you know, smaller projects into an opening ceremony and a closing ceremony for a Commonwealth Games, there was a huge amount of learning that I had to do. There was a huge amount of upskilling, and I think I had the best time like on the Gold Coast. I learned an awful lot. I was really lucky to have someone who really mentored me, and I think they knew when I got that job that I had a good recommendation from someone, which is why I got the job. And I think they kind of saw that I maybe had some of the raw tools. So I was just really lucky that someone kind of empowered me and entrusted me and really took me under their wing to be like, here are the things that you need to know, and here's what you don't need to know just yet, in a way. And I had a lot to learn in a short amount of time, and I did, you know, I did because I was lucky enough to be in a team and in a role that allowed me to do that.
That's really great, Liam. Could you tell us a little bit about your most recent project?
Yeah, for sure. I just finished a few days ago on the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. So as Kat probably knows, I'm a huge football fan. Like, football is one of my biggest passions. So like, to work last year on the Men's World Cup and then to have another opportunity to work on the Women's World Cup was hugely appealing to me. A slightly different role, probably more akin to what we did, Kat, at Expo, in terms of working on the kind of more committee side and working and having and more contract management as we did. So less producing in the traditional sense of the word, but again, a lot of what you're doing, a lot of the requirements are exactly the same. You're still managing people, you're still working to timelines, you're still trying to keep everything moving and figure out what you need to do and when. And so a lot of it's the same, but more of on the contract manager side, as opposed to the delivery contractor yourself, like I was in the last few events. So I was essentially the lead for the Homebush Stadium in Sydney. So where we held the first match in Australia, as well as the closing ceremony, the awards ceremony after the final. So there was a couple of really big events that we had to host. And again, doing ceremonies in sporting events is very different to doing ceremonies at like an Olympics or a Commonwealth Games, where that's like the feature thing and there's nothing else really happening immediately after it, and you have a lot more ownership and kind of autonomy about what you can and can't do. Whereas when you're doing sporting events, you're very much down the pecking order, you know, and that's totally fine. I mean, that the sporting event is, everyone's there for the sport. That's what you're there for. So as a ceremony and as a ceremonies team, and for me, trying to run the ceremonies requirements in that venue and build the relationships and start to help people kind of understand why it is that you need certain things, when people as a default are like, well, no, you're less important because you're not the sport. And to be fair to the team, like no one was mean about it or cruel about it. It's just, obviously we all know that the sport is paramount because it is. But at the same time, it's like, okay, cool, but how much can we how many 1%ers can we get to help us turn this ceremony from a 5 out of 10 into an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 without doing damage to the most kind of important elements of the sport. So there's a huge amount of trying to, without trying to sound just like dismissive, like educate people into what a ceremony is and why we need certain things and the impacts that can have. And I think a great example, like when I came in, like I know that there was a huge fight to just get space, like in the stadium. It was like, ceremonies needs like a compound and like a dressing room, and it's like, well, no, but why does ceremonies need space? Like explain how, you know? So it's just educating people as to what we do and to why we need certain things. So yeah, that was, so basically, yeah, it was to kind of oversee the delivery of the cultural opening, the closing ceremony, the trophy and award ceremonies, and all of the pre-match ceremonies we did at the start of each game, which, whilst, you know, not a huge show in any sense, it's just, you know, like the big flags and banners and music and stuff, there's still a delivery element to that. So yeah, it was a really busy time. So it was a short contract. It was only a few months, and it was really busy, but I had a really great time working back home for the first time in like 5 years. So it was really nice to be back.
That sounds like such a wonderful experience. You touched on something there that I'd love for you to expand on for our listeners. You mentioned the difference between working for the organizing committee and working for a contractor. Could you explain a little bit the kind of hierarchy and format of some of these events and how that works?
Yeah, for sure. So generally, when you're working on a big ceremony or a major event, you obviously have a committee side, let's say, which is responsible for the overarching delivery of everything. So, like for example, if I take FIFA as an example, I was working for the local FIFA subsidiary, and FIFA is responsible for the overall delivery, and FIFA as the committee will then appoint contractors to deliver various elements. So they'll appoint a ceremonies contractor to deliver the ceremonies. They'll appoint a branding contractor to deliver branding, or a marketing to deliver marketing. So that as the committee, they are kind of centrally responsible, and often there's like links into the government or there's links into other larger institutions. So I think we often move between them, because sometimes if you're working on the committee side, you're then overseeing and managing the delivery of the contractor that has been appointed. So it's less, I like doing both because it's less, you're less attached to the show in a way, I guess, when you're on the committee side, because you're not the team who's actually delivering the event, let's say show calling the event or stage managing the event. And it's much more strategic. It's much more about approvals, documentation. Everything is like, as I was saying before, it's like explaining to people in this committee and explaining to people in really, really high positions who are like, the CEO of delivering the entire event. Like, and I don't just mean in the stadium. It's like the broadcast. It's everything. It's every single thing that is associated with running a Commonwealth Games or a World Cup. Not just in venue, but across the whole city. Like the activations across the entire city, the entire country, the international elements. There are so many departments that go into, when we would do our daily venue meetings, there's literally 30, 40 different departments who are all there, which all funnel back up to the head of the committee, let's say. So it's much more about strategy. It's much more about approvals. It's much more about, overall management. Whereas when you're the contractor, you are then purely focused on the delivery of that show, and that's the box. And it's like, cool, you obviously agree, the general process is the committee will say, we want someone to deliver the ceremonies, and here is the kind of, how much money it could kind of be, and here's here's the scope of work, here's what we need you to deliver. And all those companies will then come back and say, here's how we would deliver that, and this is the team we would get, and we would appoint these people, and this is the general creative concept, and it would cost you this much, let's say. And then obviously, as the contractor, you're just delivering the show. You're just within that scope of work you've been provided, you're delivering that event. And anytime you need to get anything done, you go to your ceremonies kind of point of contact in the committee and say, hello, I need more space. Help me get more space, in a very, boiled down example. So you're more certainly closer to the show, because you're the ones actually, running the rehearsals and building the content. So, the contractor is the one who's actually designing the content for the show, let's say, and doing the compositions of the music and stage managing the rehearsals and doing the artwork and getting the show caller, and all the creative concepts and ideas is all coming from the contractor. So it's much more probably closer to theater in that sense. When you're on that side of the fence, you're actually creating the show. You're creating and delivering the show, as opposed to managing and ensuring that all those requirements are there for that show to be delivered, if that makes sense.
No, that's super interesting. This is kind of like a bit of an out there question, but it's something that is kind of rolling around my head as you're speaking. And it's about really the value of the entertainment factor in sports, because you said so often the entities say, well, the sport is the most important thing. And I love that. But also, the Super Bowl halftime show is one of the best things about the year. And, the US does, I recently, I've been a couple of times when I've been in Vegas to the WNBA matches, and there's a whole entertainment facet of their games that really lift, and it's so fun to go, not just because of the game, but just because of the energy and what they do. Do you think there's just more to grow in this space with regards to entertainment and sports?
Definitely. I think it's, again, I think I said in one of the first things was about expectation management and kind of people management. And I think there is a huge amount that can be done. I think it's really important to be clear to contractors or to people who are delivering these events. These are the things that you really need to be cognizant of, and these are the things we need to avoid doing. So it's not that you can't do a spectacular show as the Super Bowl shows, but you have to know the parameters that you have to work within. And I think I've seen firsthand the issue is that maybe those parameters aren't super clear from the beginning in either the scope of work or in the communication. So then a show gets devised that is an incredible show, but has certain impacts on whatever the requirements are for the sport that haven't been considered. So I think there is a massive capacity. And as you say, it is so entertaining. And these things are still, they're family events. They're still events. They have a huge level of interest. People love to go, and it elevates it. It gives a different layer, a different kind of, it's like the cherry on the cake. And I think it'd be a real shame to lose and the entertainment element from sports just because it might have a negative impact on the sport. I think it's really important. And again, I'd love another chance to work on an event like this, but from an earlier stage, let's say, where you can go, we want all of these things, but these are the things we just need you to be super aware of, and just don't, like the grass is the easiest one when you're talking football. Like everything is like every second, every
don't damage the grass,
every foot, every time, and I think people go, oh, we can do this amazing thing and it's going to be awesome, but it means having a 14-ton lighting truss on the center of the pitch. It's like, well, that's, while going to be a great show element, it's not going to be great for the grass. So it's like, how do we try to keep those really cool ideas, but do them in ways that aren't going to damage the pitch, for example, or aren't going to impact the massive amount of media and broadcast positions. Like, when you're doing these events, there's so much media when it's FIFA or it's Com Games or whatever. So many people, so much infrastructure, and anything you add is scrutinized. So it's like, you have to be really clever about what your concepts are and how you deliver them. But yeah, no, I think there's a huge potential for it. I think we've seen over the last 10 years it get more and more. Like, the opening ceremony for Qatar World Cup last year was like 20, 25 minutes, which was unheard of. You would never see, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you would never see a show that was going before a sporting event be that length or that kind of focused on. And obviously that was a unique situation, but I think there's a huge market for it. I think it should be done. I think, yeah, it's really important to be clear and set really clear parameters from the beginning of these are the things that, you really need to be really, really careful about before, diving down the rabbit hole.
So Liam, I know how much you love cross-cultural collaboration and sports and entertainment. So I'm sure the last 5 years or so have just been like a dream. But do you have a favorite event that you've worked on in the last several years?
Ooh, that's really hard. I think because it's not really, for me, it's not really apples to apples, because like Expo for me was nearly 2.5 years, whereas everything else in the last 5 years, like there's nothing that's even come close to that. Every other contract I've done has been more like 4 months, let's say. So it's hard for me to compare. If I add everything up, then of course Expo is what I would say, because there was an extra, 5 times as long for me to have things that I really enjoyed. So that is an obvious kind of front runner for me. I think the World Cup last year, given my personal interest in football and given kind of, what I guess my kind of career trajectory in the last few years also was a really, really significant one for me and something I really enjoyed. But I think just knowing what it meant for me personally and for my career and all the things that happened on that I'm so grateful for, I think it has to be Expo. It was a phenomenal time for me. It was, it's I've already felt such an impact from it, and I know I will continue to feel a massive impact from it for the rest of my career. And I feel so grateful to have had the opportunity to work on it. And it was really difficult. A lot of people had a really difficult time on it, and I'm sure we've all heard that. A lot of people are very open about that. But for me personally, for the people that I met, for what I got to learn from what I learned about myself doing it, like it was incredible for me. So it has to be Expo.
Yeah. Well, it was such an incredible experience in so many ways, and we jam-packed so much into those 6 months that it's almost like all of us, we were in the trenches together. And like you said, like it was difficult, but it was so rewarding. And it's one of those things that like over time, you just are forever bonded to those people that you worked with.
Oh yeah,
And
without
like,
doubt.
I see your face today and it's like, I just saw you yesterday. Like, you know, we're the people who went through that together were always going to be looking for each other in all these events. Right. So.
Yeah. And it's been so nice. I've had that, like, you know, since then with Birmingham, with Qatar, with Saudi earlier this year, with FIFA, like there's always been people from Expo on those jobs. And it's always like, oh my God, hey, you know, and it's, especially those people who you worked actually within your team with.
Yes.
I mean, you know, and it was a big team. So there's a lot of people, but there's still a lot of people that you worked really closely with that, as you say, there'll always be that. It's like that whole thing of like, like, not pressure makes diamonds, but that same kind of thing of like forged in like hot coals, right? You know?
Well, there's something to be said about, I think when people are pushed to their limits, then anything after that becomes a breeze. Do you know what I mean? Like I love whenever I have a particular project that I did, and I always ask myself, is this as hard as that? No, it's not. And it's always very reassuring for me. It's like, and so
it's like, I know exactly what you mean.
It's a good reference point for what you're actually capable of. And I think that, you know, those gigs that do it. What's really interesting for me, because I come from a background of running shows many times over, is in ceremonies you get one shot. Right. And there's so much at stake. Has there been anything maybe that you can share that where things nearly went really wrong, but it didn't end up going really wrong? And now a note from our sponsor. The Theatre Art Live podcast is proud to be sponsored by ClearCom. ClearCom is the leader in voice communications for theatre and the performing arts. Call your cues with the simplicity and elegance of ClearCom Intercom Solutions. You can find them at ClearCom.com. Go check them out. Have you got an example of some?
Yeah, I do have a horrifying example.
Disasters.
It's not. It wasn't for closing or for a huge show. It was actually just for one of the pre-match ceremonies we had on FIFA. So, but still, obviously, you know, there's millions of people watching. But essentially, the pre-match ceremony, as we were delivering it for all the FIFA games, was like there's one very big kind of banner that has like the logo of the World Cup, and then the two flag banners, and then you've got like the letters, and it's just like a piece of music, and you're working with volunteers, and the volunteers carry out the flags and they wave around the flags and everyone goes wild. And it's like, it sets the scene for the place to come out. So it's a super small delivery element, but in this context with FIFA, they didn't appoint a contractor to deliver that. So it was completely internally delivered. So it was essentially one person or two people within the stadium handling the kind of 110 volunteers to deliver that element. Anyway, so we had a game, which was the quarterfinal. Yeah, the quarterfinal in Sydney, which for the way that the structure was running right off the back of the Matildas quarterfinal in Brisbane. So like we were trying to watch that game, but obviously knowing that we're about to go deliver ours, and all the volunteers. So we have 110 or so volunteers. They all want to watch the game. They don't want to go and deliver the show. They want to watch the game, you know, and us too, right? So like, but it got to the point, and you know, we were like, okay, cool. We have to, like, it got to the time that the penalty shootout was about to start, and we were like, hey, this is normally when we would leave the volunteer centre to travel down to the VOM to get ready to come on for the show. And I was like, okay, but we'll just watch the shootout and then we'll go, you know. But then of course it became like the longest shootout known to mankind. And it got to one point, and I was like, we have to just go. Like, I'm so sorry, guys. Like, I'm Australian. I'm as invested as all of you guys. But if we don't leave, we're not going to make this show, and I can't risk that. So we have to go. So we left. And the way that the stadium was designed and the location of the volunteer centre, you have to kind of go through a lot of the front of house kind of concourse areas to get down into the basement to get to the tunnel, because it's not designed as a back of house dressing room. It's as like a tent on the street level. And we went out and we're trying to make our way down to the pitch side, to the VOM. And because the stadium was showing the match on the little screens all around the concourse, of course, there's tens of thousands of people on the concourse watching the screens, and blocking the concourse. We literally couldn't pass. And we were stuck. And I was like, I don't know, like I'm calling access and security. It's like, if I can't get through here and I can't get down, I can't bring my volunteers out. We can't deliver the show. Like, and again, it's not like the end of the world, but it would have been a really bad look to not have that involved in part of the show. And so the access people came, they helped us. We found a different way to get down. We find our way down, and it's like, oh my God, we're just in time. There's like 4 minutes to spare, and we're going to get there. We finally get there, and to cut, this story's already too long, but basically we get to the VOM and we're like, yes, we made it. And then we realize we were in the opposite corner of the stadium. We weren't, because we had gone a different way to normal, and someone else had led them, and there was 3 different groups, and I'd lost like 30 volunteers, and I'm like, where'd they go? Oh my God, it was just chaos, absolute chaos.
Oh my God.
And oh my God, so when I realized, we got to the VOM, and I realized we're in the wrong corner, and it's a massive stadium, it's a huge place, right? And I looked at my watch, and I'll never forget it, looking at my watch and seeing that it was less than 10 minutes. Yeah, no, less than 5 minutes until we're meant to be in position on the pitch with the banner, and we were in the wrong corner of the stadium. And it's like terror, right? When you're like in the nightmare. And I was like, I've never missed a show in my life. Like, Kat, I'm early for everything.
Oh, I know.
Like,
I'm stressed for you right now. I feel this for you.
Yeah, you build in buffer time everywhere. And I was literally like, we're not going to make it. We're just not going to make it. Like, I can't go around. And I had the access person with me, and I was like, and basically we figured out the only way this was going to happen was if we literally cut across the pitch. Like, we can't go around.
Run across.
The only way. So literally we and the wristbands that we had aren't meant to work there because there's lots of access control, obviously, with the pitch, with FIFA, anyway, managed to just like talk the security guard with with the help of the access person to let us on. And I'm literally like talking to these 110 volunteers. Some are like, 70, 80 years old, and there's very, very wide demographic of volunteers, right? And I'm like, go, run. And we're literally running around the pitch, like behind the goals, behind the LEDs, like the players are warming up, and they're just like, we're sprinting across the pitch, like, go. It was just the most chaotic experience ever. But basically,
it just sounds awesome.
And I remember calling the show call. I was like, hey, like, I might be late, and I know we can't delay because obviously then kickoff's delayed and you can't delay kickoff, of course. Anyway, we ran and we made it with about, literally we got there and the track started and we delivered it and it was fine and it looked great. But it was just the most horrifying, sorry, that was such a long story, but it was such a horrifying thing of like, oh my God, when I realized where we were and I was like, we're not going to make it. And I was like, I've never missed a show in my life ever, and this is my responsibility. It's my deliverable, So if it hadn't gone wrong, it would have just been the worst. But also it's the funniest story now. All the volunteers had the best time. They got to just run around the pitch and like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was hilarious, but yeah, it was a lot.
It's a good
Anna,
story.
let me tell you, I sat about 4 feet from Liam for like 18 months. And this is absolutely, without a doubt, this man's worst nightmare.
Yeah, 100%, no doubt. Being missing a show, like being late.
I mean, it's many of our worst nightmare. But Liam, my heart goes out to you.
Yeah, thank you.
I totally feel you. I haven't called shows for a long time now because I'm a producer, but I historically have called shows for many years, and still to this day, when I'm having a nightmare, it's about me calling a show, and I either can't read the prompt script or I've got the wrong prompt script, and it's like that's my worst nightmare, and I'm always stuck in this show situation where I can't call it for some whatever reason. It's still like my nightmare.
Yeah. Horrible, horrifying.
I know what that is.
Oh my gosh.
So,
but we made it.
Just side note, I want to rewind. You did a degree in music. So what do you play?
Piano and sing.
Nice. And so how does that play into your career now as that being part of your pedigree?
I think there's 2 parts to it. I think like having started as a performer and I would still consider myself a creative person. Like I write music and I record music, and that's a big part of my life that I do kind of between jobs really. But I still identify as a creative person. And I think as a producer, and you've touched on this on the episode you did with Emma about being a generalist in a different context, but I always remember that. And for me, having the ability to kind of feel like you have a connection and an understanding of creative and stage management and operations and technical and all the different departments is actually probably the most important thing to be able to deliver a role as a producer. But because I would like to think that I understand the creative process and I understand what it means to be a creative and be attached to ideas. And when I go into the studio and I have ideas that my producer we're working through. So like I know what it's like to be a creative person, and I think that really helps me have conversations with creative producers and creative directors and creatives to kind of help me understand what they want and why things are important to them. So I think having a creative background really helps as a producer. A lot in terms of the role that it plays. Like when I'm working, it's not like they don't overlap. And like I get a bit funny when people are like, oh, I didn't realize that you like, people follow you on Instagram or whatever, and they're like, oh my god, you're like a singer and a songwriter and you released an album. And I'm like, yeah, let's not talk about that. Like I don't want to talk about that here. Like when I'm in workspace, it's like it's almost like a different life to me, like, and it's a huge part of who I am. I love music. I'll never stop writing music and singing. It's a huge passion of mine, but I don't really like the two of them to cross over. I'll never be like, I'm going to compose this piece of music for this show because I'm also a composer. Like I would never want to do that. But I think it really helps being a producer to understand the creative process.
Where can we find your music, Liam?
My music can be found. No, it's like all the usual places. I released my second album earlier this year, which I did kind of in a frantic 2 weeks between jobs. But yeah, no, it's like it's something that I am hugely passionate about. But yeah, super funny. Even talking about it here, I'm like, super weird. It's like that's something else. That's like a different Liam, But it's yeah.
No, but I think your need to be on time probably comes from the timing from your musical background. I think. Yeah, it probably influences more than you think. But I think that, I agree that the musicality and the timing and all of those, like you said, that creative process is so important for producers to understand. That because you have to be empathetic to their needs and their desires, totally. Right? So, and also if you're trying to manifest something in a particular direction, if you can show that you understand where they're at, I mean that's a huge talent to do that. So I'm probably sure that it really plays into your career. And what's next? Have you got your next project booked up?
Yeah, in a very fortunate thing as a freelancer, as I'm sure you'll know, I have the next two things already locked in, which is like a rare luxury as a freelancer. So I fly out in 5 days to Dubai, and I will be working on the UAE National Day ceremony with people as a producer. So that's I'm looking forward to going back to Dubai. Obviously, I was there for nearly 2.5 years working on Expo, and I haven't been back really since. So I'm looking forward to being back there and working with some really good friends. So that'll be from September through till December. And then I'm going to Qatar to work on the opening ceremony for the Asian Cup. So back in the football world, which I'm super stoked about. So I've got the next couple of things lined up, which is really nice. And yeah, I'm really excited about both of those projects and both of those roles. So yeah, it's cool.
That is cool. What would you say is the strategy as a global event freelancer? How do you actually get work? How do you line these things up? I think I know your answer to this, but I'll be interested to hear.
I think you have to how do I say this? I think when you get near the end of a job, it's really funny. Everyone's always the same. So what's your next thing? Everyone starts having those conversations. I think it's important to be honest about what you want. And I'm super, I always say to people I'd love to work on this, and to kind of, and I've experienced it now where I will forget about somebody. And then let's say someone says to me, I'm looking for a great stage manager or a great producer or a great whatever. And then someone will message me about something else. And I'm like, oh, that person's the best. Actually, you should hire that person. But so it's kind of a little bit out of sight, out of mind. I'm not saying you should just go around randomly texting everyone every week and be like, hey, how's your day? Because it's obviously too transparent. But I think building your network is the most important thing, and building that in an honest way, not building it in a way of I'm trying to just build my network to get jobs, but building your network just as a person and making friends and being a good person. I think and I was making some notes of things I might want to talk about here. And one of the things that I am super passionate about is just being a good person. Just be a good person. Doesn't matter how good you are as a specialist in a field or whatever. If you're not a good person and you don't have good intentions and you don't want to just help people because you care about your colleagues, or all of that is, for me, more important than your ability as a specialist in whatever your field is. As you know, when you do events, when you do shows, things always get super stressful and super crazy. And the thing, when I'm building a team, and I know when people are building a team, the question is, who do I want around me when things are on fire? Who is that person? And that is paramount, right? So I think be that person. Be the person that other people want around when the show is on fire, because the show will inevitably be on fire at some point. So I think that's a huge part of it. So yeah, and just being open about, this is the job that I want to do. If you hear anything on that, give me a shout. And it's not pushy, it's not repetitive, but that's how I refer people to other jobs, and I know that's how people have referred me to jobs, just from that kind of open, honest conversation with my friends. And I think I've been really lucky to, again, do a couple of really awesome jobs with a lot of really awesome people. And I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but the last few jobs you get to a point where everything just comes through recommendations and everything comes through people having worked with you in the past. And I think you touched on this, Anna, in an episode a while ago about how do you, if you need to, get away from people just hiring people they've worked with, and that's a super interesting thing that's not for this conversation, but it's that's, you kind of end up in that position where you've built enough of a network, you've been a good person, and then you're on this kind of train together. So yeah, be honest, be open, be a good human. That's my short answer to your question. Yeah,
it's kind of like when people say, every gig is kind of your audition for the next one.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. And actually, consistency, consistency. That's one word. The value of anyone is in their consistency. I would rather have someone who's 8 out of 10 every day than someone who's 10 out of 10 for 7 of the days and then a 3. You every day, and it's not as extreme as this, but it's every day you get up and you go in, and whatever you accomplished yesterday or whatever you proved yesterday, prove it again. You can't just rest on yesterday's accomplishments, and of course we're all human. We need time off. We're not going to be at A++ every day, of course. But in terms of your care factor about the people around you, and your care factor about the level of the quality of work you're delivering, maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but on a week-to-week basis, right? You have to be consistent. You have to deliver at the same level all the time, because as soon as you become inconsistent, that will get remembered really strongly. I know that firsthand. So I think consistency is super, super, super important, and not getting comfortable. You always, it's I'm sure it's in our psyche a lot. You always just want it. You have to just want it. You have to just want it. You have to want it more, and you have to care.
I love that. I don't think people have articulated that much on our podcast before in terms of that word consistency. But the fact that you've articulated it now, I think it is, as somebody who hires people, that's exactly what you're looking for when you're getting people. You really, and what does that mean individually? Like you said, showing up at 8 out of 10 a day is better than 10 out of 10 inconsistently. 100% agree to that. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think it's there's two kinds of people, right? It's when you're managing people or you're managing a team, it's there's the kind of people that I can give this task to that person and I can take it out of my brain and I can forget about it. And as a producer, that's the most coveted attribute. And then there's the kind of people that you kind of say, here's this task, and then you go, I don't know if it got done. Do I have to follow up on that? And when it's someone that you can't trust is going to consistently deliver, and I'm not saying deliver something that's extraordinarily difficult. Sometimes it's a fairly basic task, but it's still the consistency of knowing that it's going to get done. That's super critical.
I always say there's two types of people: the people you can send an email and delete it, and the other person is you send an email and keep it to follow up on later, and you really want the former in your life.
I love that. I've never actually heard it said that way, but that's super
But I
true.
always ask myself, because that shows whether somebody you can really rely on. And I want to just make a point too, because you in the one-off events, but the same applies in long-running shows, and if not even more. And I've had that a lot of conversation, especially in Kat knows this, in a performer sense. Yes, a performer can do all the tricks and they do all of the acts and they can do all of the things, but what we really need is somebody who delivers 80% every day, 10 shows a week, 48 weeks a year, than doing 110% and doing something amazing one day and then getting injured, being out for 6 weeks. That doesn't help anybody's life, right? So there's the skill. It doesn't even apply in the producer and the technical realm. It also applies for the performers and the creative realm as well, across the board in our industry, which is really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the performers are the ones that everybody sees every day, right? That's what people are paying to watch. So it applies to them probably more than anybody. It's just as applicable.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is your most favorite thing about your job or the industry, if you could summarize it in one sentence or one item?
I would say the global nature, like being able to work globally and working with so many different types of people and cultures and places, but still that humanity is humanity, like kindness is kindness, and people, the things that make us who we are. I'm not articulating this very well, but it's the fact that I get to travel in all these different places and do jobs, and every place it's different, and it's always different people, but it's always the same. I always feel so lucky that we get to do this kind of work where it is just like this massive melting pot of people, and I come away professionally learning so much every time, but also on a personal level. Like I've learned so much about humanity and about people and about myself and about the world because I've done a job. This person just was like Brazilian that I did this job with, and then or they came from this kind of socioeconomic background, or their parents did this or whatever, right? Like every time you get put into this brand new, environment, and there's always so much you can take from that. I love that every job, every city, every country, every role, there's always such a huge potential to learn from other people. And again, not just in a professional sense. I find that really beautiful. And I really love that part of it. I feel so lucky to be able to just to do this kind of work, and that I just kind of fell into it, and that you just get to work on these really awesome shows and spectacles with really awesome people who all, not all, but who generally see the world the way that you see it, and value the things that you value. And there's always, even if it's not everybody, there's always the people that you walk away from with those shows who you go, this is now my person, like forever, And I've done that on every job. I've always walked away being like these people, and sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 20, whatever. But there's always people you're like, this is now we are now people, And that's so beautiful. It's so cool. It's so cool.
That's beautiful, Liam. I agree. If you could change one thing about your job or about the industry as a whole, what would it be?
Oh, that's really tough. If I could change one thing, I don't know. I'm struggling to pinpoint one thing. I think, no, that's not quite true. I don't know. I think I have to pass. There's nothing really that jumps out at me that's coming to me right now, I have to say.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Sounds like you've got a great job.
I think the only thing in this, I don't want to take it too far the other direction, but something that I've definitely learned recently, and as I've done more jobs, is to this kind of expectation of work has to be not work has to be your life, but I think young people, and me when I was younger, and I think both of us, you kind of wear this badge of honor of I can work 18-hour days, 7 days a week because I'm amazing, and it's sometimes I think it can permeate into that younger generation of working hard is something to aspire to. And of course, working hard is something to aspire to, but you have to take care of yourself. And I think the industry is slowly starting to move towards that. I think certainly I feel it a little bit, but maybe it's just the circle that I'm in, to kind of get away from this. If you don't end up being sleep deprived during tech week, you've failed. Like it shouldn't be that crazy. Yes, of course there are crazy deadlines, and of course there are times you have to go above and beyond what like a normal 9 to 5, right? But it's like, it's also not doing damage to yourself as a person in the process, and finding those boundaries. And again, everyone's different, and I think I've been fortunate enough that I've worked in kind of environments where that's respected. Not to say that I think still sometimes we all push ourselves maybe a little bit too far, but I don't know, you get carried away, and especially in ceremonies when it's like as you say, you have one shot, so it's like you have to, there's always going to be a time where you have to go above and beyond and push beyond what would be kind of considered normal. But again, it's knowing when it's worth doing that, and when it's actually really essential, and when actually, why can't you just do this tomorrow? Like, the show's not going to fall apart if you don't send these 10 emails tonight, go home, So it's knowing your own limitations, and not feeling pressured by people in positions of power or certain positions that you have to do things on unreasonable deadlines, let's say. And again, I haven't personally experienced it all that bad, but I know people who have, and I have seen it in ways. So I think, yeah, just slowly, again, it's a gradual thing, but slowly kind of improving that side of the culture. That would be the only thing. And it's not like, again, it's not like this is a disaster, but something that could potentially be improved upon.
Yeah, I agree. But I think also probably because you have another outlet being your music and your composition. For me, I find that like it's when you consume yourself, and I've certainly been guilty of that in the past, it's like, who are you when you're not at work?
Yeah.
Right. And I think one thing that's really important to establish is that maybe you can do 18 hours a day, but who are you when you're not at work? Because if you don't cultivate that outside it, then your life is consumed by it. And as people experience that in the pandemic and they lost all their jobs, they're like, well, what do I do now? Who am I when I don't work? And I think that there has to be things on the other side, even if it's a small amount of things, but as long as it's something that, I don't care if you knit or you read or you do yoga or you create music or whatever it is, there has to be something, or spend time with family, there's got to be something on the outside. And that creates a healthier perception of it, right? If you're cultivating something outside.
For sure. Yeah. I still find, like, even though, I'm lucky that I have other things that I am really passionate about, you still, when you come out the other side, and I have it in every job, like every ceremony, you have that crazy period where it's go, get the show ready, and then you deliver it. And then you come out the other side, and then it's kind of like you have those 2 days of like,
I
don't want to. It's like you're coming out. It's like you've been in the washing machine, and then you kind of come out and go, but what do I do with my day now? Like, I'm just like, I had that. I was literally like, I'm like, what do I do? What do I get up and I don't have to just leave the house. Like, what do I do? Like, it is such a thing. We all get it.
It's very disorientating. It is very disorientating for that to happen. And there's much mental health factors in that, because you do get that high and then they come down and then take another project, and and you've got to navigate through that. That's not an easy emotional journey, right?
It's not. And I think, again, you have to have those things, or those people in your life, or whatever, the things that can ground you, or when you're going through those transition periods, as we all do, that can keep you on track or can give you that support. Like, I'm super lucky that, like, particularly here, I've got my family and some really close friends who, when I had those couple of days, it's like, hey, like, I was feeling like this today, like, let's just chat, and like having things and having people that can help you through that, because there's for sure a mental health impact. There's a huge, that those adjustments are really kind of sudden in ways, because you just go, and then it just screeches to a halt. And, we as people always need time to adjust and adapt and transition. So I think it's super, super important.
Yeah, it's especially hard as well, because the majority of the time, I mean, not for you this time, but the majority of the time, we're traveling to work so far from our friends and family and partners and support systems.
Yep.
And then it's like you don't even realize what kind of toll that can take on your mental health until you stop, until it's done, and you have that, it's over, and then you look around and you go, oh my gosh, what what do I do now? Where is everyone? Where am I? What's happening?
Yeah, definitely. I think like it's also really important, like on that note, it's really important to be honest with yourself about when you need a break and when you need time off, because no one's going to tell you you should take a break. Like, and I think we've all pushed ourselves too hard over extended periods of time. Like, and like at the start of this year, I kind of took like 7-8 weeks off for the first time since I can remember. And I remember being like, okay, I want to have like 3 weeks off and then I want to try to get back to work. And then I had like 2 or 3 weeks off and I was like, oh my God, I don't even feel like I've even rested yet, like, and it was actually so amazing to just have some time off. Like it was the best thing ever. And I didn't realize how much I needed it until I was taking it. So it's like, I think it's really important. I say this to people who are always doing that, like finish one and just go to the next, go to the next, go to the next. Like, of course, if it's a great opportunity and it's a great thing and it fits within the overall balance of your life, for sure. But I think it's also really important to go, okay, cool. After this next one, I need to stop just for, even if it's for 3 weeks or whatever. Like no one will tell you and no one can know when it's time for you to take a break. Only you really can know that. So you have to be honest with yourself in that sense. I think that's really important. And I say that a lot to people I work with when I can start to see that maybe they need a break. It's not a failing to do that. You're not failing to do that. There's nothing wrong with it. Like it's actually super important. And then I found after that, you can come back and be better, and have a better perspective on things,
Yeah, it's like that saying, I'm not sure exactly how it goes, but I think it's something like, if you don't take time for your wellness, you will have to make time for your illness. And it's not necessarily, always that dire, but if you don't take the time to regularly maintain your life and your rest and your work-life balance, you're just going to burn out.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
and that's not good for anybody. It's, it's horrible for your own mental health. You're not going to deliver the same way that you would. It's a really important thing. And it's really nice that we're talking about that so much more. And I found that actually on like several of our podcast episodes, this is something that people bring up because it's becoming more and more a part of our conversation and more a part of our industry, is trying to find solutions so that we don't run ourselves into the ground, and so that we can actually continue to do this thing that we love, but also take care of ourselves physically and mentally.
Yeah, 100%. Nobody wins if we just run ourselves into the ground. No one comes out
Absolutely
ahead.
Absolutely not.
Situation. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, the other people that are affected around you are also your family and the people that you do care about, because you coming back from wherever is an adjustment for them, and it's never, or, I think adults, it's an internal adjustment, and maybe you can work it out. But for me, it was never so more visible than with my children, because I'd come over for like 4 months, like, come to mum's arms, and they're like, who are you? Like, no, but it's heartbreaking because you need to give them the time to adjust to come back to you. And so you've got to understand that other people are adjusting to your presence back in the house as well. And that's something that I've had to learn. Well, children teach you everything, actually, but like the a beautiful lesson. It's not because it affects my husband and it affects other people around me when I come home too. It's not like I'm back again, everything's back to normal. No,
for sure.
So
I don't. Yeah, I don't have kids, but I had a similar thing with my niece, like, because I was super close with my brother's kids before I went to Dubai, and then I was obviously gone for a really long time. And when I came back, it was super heartbreaking because it was like I was a stranger, and that was really sad, just to be like, oh, like. But of course, it's fair. Like you can't, like when they're young.
But 2 years in a kid's lifetime is
exactly.
Forever, right?
And it was honestly like I was a stranger, and like I obviously, like down the line, I would love to have a family and stuff like that. But I just, it just feels like I know that there's so many challenges in a beautiful way. I'm not saying, of course, it's just like it's just another whole thing that you have to balance and try to balance, and like, as you say, like it's a. Your family and the people around you have to adjust to that absence too, and like how that makes them feel. It's really challenging. It's really challenging. I think the hard thing for me on this one is, like you touched on it, Kat. Normally you're away, and like normally there's this kind of bittersweet thing when you finish a job for me of like, oh, I'm sad that I'm done and I'm going to miss all these people, but now I'm going to go home for a week or two and see my family. But now, like, this is the first time that it's like I'm finishing a job. And then I'm leaving my home. So it's like I have the sadness of leaving a job and also of leaving my family.
Oh, no.
So it's been an adjustment thing too, of like, and I've been home for like 3 months, which I haven't been home for 3 months. I've been home longer in this stretch than I had like in the last 3 years combined. So
Wow.
it's like, you get used to that thing of like, oh, yeah, that's what it's like to be back home.
Yes.
So it's been super nice. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm super excited to go do some other awesome shows and stuff. But yeah, like just gives you perspective on things, which I think is important too, you know.
Well, now you can be excited to return to our Dubai family. And that's one thing to look forward to,
which is exciting for sure.
Yeah. What a beautiful journey, though. Thank you so much for sharing, Liam, your work and your life. It's been a really wonderful conversation. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Liam.
Theatre Art Live is a global media site for entertainment. Memberships start at only $38 per year. You can have unlimited access to our daily published articles, including entertainment news and the writings of active industry professionals, ensuring that you are always up to date on the global happenings in the world of entertainment. Become a part of the international entertainment community and join us now at www.theatreartlive.com.